In the green hills of central Ghana, near the town of Mampong, nestled in the sacred lands of the Ashanti people, there is a grove the villagers called Samanfo Mirwawa, the whispering grove of the ancestors. This is not a place one stumbles upon lightly. The trees seem to lean inwards, whispering through rustling leaves. Birds sing in odd patterns. The wind shifts direction unpredictably. For generations, this grove has been the sacred meeting place between the living and the dead. The story that follows is real. It has been passed down and verified through the elders of the town, and recorded by an ethnographer named Kojo Mensah, who lived among the Ashanti people for more than 20 years. At the heart of this story are two individuals, Nana Kwame, the eldest surviving member of the royal lineage, and Auntie Adwoa, a respected diviner known throughout the Ashanti highlands. Their journey in communicating with the spirits of the ancestors changed the fate of an entire community. In 1993, the village of Mampong faced a drought so severe that it had begun to unravel the very fabric of society. The streams dried up. The yams rotted underground. Children fell ill. Animals wandered in search of water and collapsed in the fields. No one had ever seen anything like it. The people did what they always did in times of trouble, they turned to their elders. Nana Kwame, nearly 90 at the time, was brought to the village square on a carved wooden stool that had been passed down from his grandfather. He listened as the villagers spoke of their suffering. Then, in a voice still strong despite his age, he said, "The ancestors are not pleased." A hush fell over the crowd. He explained that for 3 years, the sacred grove had been neglected. Offerings had not been made. Ceremonies had been skipped. The annual libation festival had been replaced by modern distractions. "If you forget them," he said, "they will forget you." That same night, Nana Kwame sent word to Auntie Adwoa, who lived in a hut on the edge of the forest, where herbs hung from the ceiling and bones were wrapped in red cloth. She was not a witch, as outsiders sometimes assumed, but a bokyefo, a diviner, one who reads the patterns of life and death, of dreams and omens. When she arrived, the entire village gathered. Adwoa threw cowrie shells onto a mat. She burned herbs and watched the smoke. She chanted to the spirits and asked questions in a language older than Twi. Finally, her eyes rolled back and she whispered a name, Nana Badu. Nana Badu was a chief who had died nearly 60 years before. He had once led the village through war and famine. He was a fierce protector of tradition, and he was angry. "The water has stopped because the people have forgotten," Auntie Adwoa declared. "You must go to the grove. You must speak to Nana Badu and the elders in the spirit world. Only they can forgive you." The next morning, before sunrise, a small group led by Nana Kwame and Auntie Adwoa set out toward the grove. They carried palm wine, kola nuts, smoked fish, and sacred cloth. No one spoke. At the entrance to the grove, they stopped. Auntie Adwoa painted white clay on their foreheads and tied red string around their wrists. "Do not step on the roots," she warned. "And do not speak unless spoken to." Inside the grove, the air was thick and cool. They moved slowly, making their way to the ancient Abujuadua, the sacred family tree that had stood for hundreds of years. Nana Kwame poured libation, whispering in Twi, "Come, ancestors. Come and hear your children." A hush fell. The forest stilled. Then Auntie Adwoa dropped to her knees. She began to shake, gently at first, then violently. Her voice changed. It deepened. It was no longer her voice. It was Nana Badu. Through Auntie Adwoa, Nana Badu spoke to the group. "You have forgotten the old ways," the spirit boomed. "You have allowed pride and modern comfort to take the place of sacrifice." Nana Kwame knelt. "Forgive us, ancestor," he said. "You will be forgiven," said the spirit, "but you must remember. A ritual was prescribed. For 3 days and nights, the village would fast. On the fourth day, a goat would be sacrificed in the grove. Songs would be sung. The stories of the ancestors would be retold by the fireside, as they had been for centuries. Only then would the water return. The village obeyed. For 3 days, fires burned in silence. Women pounded fufu and sang songs in honor of the old chiefs. Children learned the names of their ancestors. Drummers beat ancient rhythms through the night. On the fourth day, the goat was led to the grove. Auntie Adwoa, wearing a robe of white, performed the sacrifice. Blood touched the roots of the Abujuadua, and a prayer was spoken. That night, the rain began. It fell in sheets, soaking the parched earth, refilling the streams. The people danced in the mud. Children cried with joy. The ancestors had forgiven. Years passed. Nana Kwame died in his sleep at age 96. He was buried near the grove, with the songs of his ancestors echoing through the trees. Auntie Adwoa continued to serve as a diviner until she was too old to walk. Before she died, she trained a young woman named Esi, who now lives on the same forest edge. The grove still stands. Children are brought there to learn. Elders still tell the story of the drought, the angry spirit, and the reconciliation. Visitors sometimes come, tourists, scholars, skeptics, and many leave changed, unsure of what they've seen. What remains is this truth: in the traditional religions of Africa, the past is not dead. The elders carry memory. The diviners speak for the dead. And the ancestors are always listening. When Esi was just 12 years old, she began having dreams she could not explain. In one of them, she stood in the middle of the grove. The trees were whispering. And faces emerged from the bark, old faces, weathered by time, staring at her with expectation. In another dream, Auntie Adwoa appeared, holding a gourd of palm wine. "Drink," she said, "so you may speak." Esi told no one at first. Her mother dismissed them as childish imagination. But when Esi began waking up speaking languages no one had taught her, languages from older times, her grandmother took her by the hand and brought her to Auntie Adwoa. Adwoa listened, watched, and nodded. "She's been chosen," she said. Thus began Esi's training, not in a classroom, but in the forest, in dreams, and in silence. Auntie Adwoa did not teach by words alone. She showed Esi how to feel the earth beneath her feet, how to know when a spirit was near, how to interpret the trembling of leaves and the meaning of smoke. Most of all, she taught Esi to listen. "You will not always see them," she said. "But you will feel when they are close. And when they speak, you must speak back. That is your role. That is your burden." When Esi was 18, the village was struck by another crisis, though not of nature this time, but of sorrow. A child, a 7-year-old boy named Kojo, disappeared from his family's compound. His parents searched frantically. The forest was combed. The rivers were dragged. There were no signs, no footprints, no witnesses, no clue as to where he had gone. After 3 days, despair set in. The family approached Esi, who by then had begun working as a diviner in her own right. Though young, she had a reputation for accuracy, especially in cases of illness and lost animals. This, however, was her first case involving a human soul. That night, she fasted and slept outside the grove. In the early hours before dawn, she dreamt of a narrow path winding through the trees. She followed it until she saw a boy sitting on a rock, looking confused and cold. Behind him stood an old woman dressed in Kent cloth, her head wrapped in white. The woman said, "He is not ready to leave." Esi woke with tears on her cheeks. She returned to the grove with the child's mother and performed the rite of Ankasa, a calling ceremony. She placed a bowl of water on the ground, with a mirror beside it, and chanted the names of Kojo's ancestors. The air grew still. The mother wept softly. Suddenly, Esi's body jerked forward. And her voice changed. She called out in a deep tone, "He is by the water's edge. Look again." The villagers returned to the river, and found Kojo sitting under a tree, alive but silent. Staring into space. He was weak but unharmed. He remembered nothing, except the face of an old woman who told him to wait. The villagers praised Esi and honored the ancestors. A goat was sacrificed in thanksgiving. Esi's fame began to grow. People came from distant towns, some walking for days, to seek her counsel. But power, she learned, came with weight. There were times when she was called to intervene in disputes between families. She had to listen not only to the living but also to the spirits of the deceased who claimed their names had been dishonored. In one case, two brothers argued over inheritance. Esi consulted the grove and returned with a message: "Your father left the land to the youngest. The oldest has taken what is not his." The elder brother was outraged. But when a sudden illness struck him days later, he returned trembling and begged forgiveness, not from Esi, but from the shrine of his ancestors. Esi did not claim power for herself. She was merely a vessel, a medium. Yet people often misunderstood this, treating her like a queen or a sorceress. She responded always with humility, "It is not I who speaks, it is those before me." Nana Kwame once told her, shortly before his death. The ancestors are not only in the grove. They are in your voice, your dreams, and your shadow. You are their mouth. Speak with care. Not every case ended in answers. There were times, weeks even, when the spirits refused to speak. Esi called these the silent seasons. During one such time, a family begged her to find out why their harvest was failing despite good weather. She consulted the grove. She fasted. She threw bones and cowries. Nothing came. Frustrated, she returned again and again, until finally, a voice whispered, not from the forest, but from within her. "The land has been cursed by the blood of a forgotten child." She returned to the family and asked them if, long ago, a child had died unburied, unnamed. The grandmother fell to her knees, sobbing. A baby had died in childbirth 50 years ago, hidden out of shame, buried outside the family land. He had no name. No rites had been performed. No ancestor path had been opened. Esi led a naming ritual for the dead, an extremely rare ceremony. The child was given a name, Kwabena Badu, and his spirit was formally introduced to the family line. Within weeks, the land began to heal. The yams grew full. Rain fell softly. Harmony returned. When Auntie Adwoa fell ill, Esi tended to her personally. The old woman could no longer speak much, but her eyes remained alert. One evening, she beckoned Esi to sit beside her. With trembling fingers, she placed a string of cowrie shells in Esi's hands. "They are yours now," she whispered. "But never forget who gave them to us." A week later, she died. Esi performed the funeral rites. As part of the ceremony, she entered the grove alone and poured libation at the base of the sacred tree. She called out to the ancestors. She called out to Auntie Adwoa. The wind shifted. The trees rustled. And the cowries in her pouch began to rattle, though she had not moved. She smiled. The old woman had returned. As Esi grew in wisdom and age, her role as a diviner began to evolve. No longer was she just a medium for personal consultations, her voice was now sought in matters of community, justice, and land. But then came a challenge unlike any she had faced. One day, a delegation arrived from a town nearly 60 kilometers away, Akimoto. Their people had recently disturbed an ancient forest to build a road, and ever since, they had been plagued by strange phenomena: crops spoiled overnight, snakes slithered into homes, and children fell ill in their sleep, whispering names no one recognized. The town's chief, desperate, had been told by an elder that someone in Mampang still remembered the ways of the ancestors. That someone was ESI. Despite warnings from her apprentices, ESI agreed to travel to Akimoto. Upon her arrival, ESI was led to the edge of the disturbed forest. Where trees had been cleared, the ground looked raw and wounded. Machinery sat abandoned, rusting under the sun. ESI did not enter immediately. She fasted for 2 days. On the third day, she walked alone into the edge of the remaining grove. The silence was oppressive, not the peaceful kind of silence, but a waiting, watching silence. She lit a small fire and poured libation, calling on any spirit willing to speak. At first, there was nothing. But then she heard it, a faint whisper. Not in her ears but in her chest: "You cut the bones of the elders." The spirits here were older than even she had known. They were primordial guardians, protectors of the forest who predated even the local chieftaincies. They were angry, not just about being forgotten, but about being violated. ESI left the grove and demanded to meet with the town elders. In a crowded hall, ESI spoke with authority and calm. "You have disturbed spirits that are not easily soothed," she said. "This is not only about offerings. This is about acknowledgement. You built your road without asking. You took what was not yours to take." There was resistance. Some scoffed. Others were afraid. The local pastor accused her of bringing demons. But one of the oldest women in the town stood up and said, "My grandmother used to say, 'Never walk where you have not greeted the earth.' We forgot. She has reminded us." Under ESI's guidance, a ritual of apology and renewal was performed. A portion of the forest was replanted. A shrine was constructed to honor the displaced spirits. For the first time in months, the children slept peacefully. Back in Mampang, ESI became quieter. The journey to Akimoto had taken a toll on her spirit. She had felt the weight of forgotten places, of abandoned customs, of the slow erosion of the sacred. She gathered her apprentices, 5 of them now, and told them, "The spirits are not only in the trees. They are in stories. If the stories die, so do the spirits." So she began to dictate everything she knew. She spoke of every ritual, every prayer, every variation of libation. She recorded the old names, the dream symbols, the omens of birds and rain and fire. She translated chants into Chui and English, to ensure the next generation would understand. Her apprentices compiled the notes, drawings, and oral recordings into what became known as the Book of the Whispering Grove, not a holy book in the Western sense, but a guide to ancestral connection in a modernizing world. Years later, a chief from a nearby district visited ESI, now elderly and walking with a carved staff. He came to seek advice. His people had stopped attending ancestral rites, preferring imported faiths. He felt powerless to reconnect them. ESI asked him, "Do you still call your father's name when you pour water?" He looked down. "No," he admitted. She nodded. "Start there. A nation forgets its gods when it forgets its grandmothers." She taught him a simple rite, every morning, before the chief greeted his people. He would pour water on the ground and whisper the names of his forebears. Within months, others followed. A quiet revival began, not in rebellion against other faiths, but in harmony with them. The ancestors, ESI always said, do not demand exclusivity. They only ask to be remembered. As her final days approached, Esi told her apprentices she had one more message to deliver, not to the living, but to the dead. She returned once more to Samantho Mirwawa, the Whispering Grove. She fasted for 7 days. On the 8th, she entered alone. No one followed. She did not return that night, nor the next. On the morning of the 3rd day, the grove shook with wind. Though the skies were clear, leaves spiraled through the air, and the Abujua Dua glowed faintly in the early sun. When her apprentices entered, they found her staff resting against the tree. Her cowries neatly placed in a circle, and a faint print of her body on the ground. She was gone, but not dead. The elders said she had crossed over willingly, taken by the ancestors into their realm, as some great ones are. To this day, Esi's name is called during libations across Ashanti lands. She is remembered not only as a diviner but as a bridge. She proved that the ancient and the modern could speak, if only someone was willing to listen. Her grove remains sacred. Young initiates still come to learn beneath the trees. Her staff is housed in a shrine, and her story, recorded in voice, in writing, and in song, continues to be told in schools, homes, and ceremonies. Elders remind their children. Before the missionaries came, before the books, we had Esi. And through her, we had the ancestors. This is not just the story of one woman. It is the story of the living world's connection to the unseen. It is the story of how elders and diviners, often misunderstood, serve as memory keepers, mediators, and protectors of the soul of Africa. To dismiss them is to sever the root from the tree. But to honor them is to find shade, fruit, and legacy. In every libation poured, every name whispered to the earth, the ancestors live on. And through elders and diviners, they still speak.